on the moon one day. In the merry, merry month of December. Now, May, when much to my surprise, a pair of bunny eyes. Oh, this is a neat way to travel. Isn't it great?
Until recently, the global economy was dominated by the production of industrial goods. But not anymore. In the 21st century, a new commodity has become critical to business processes, development, indeed to the realization of human potential. And the new commodity is knowledge.
We're on the verge of sort of a media democracy movement, which I think is very similar to the environmental movement that we saw years ago.
When my mother is now sending me links to watch stuff online, I know that it's really spread. You know that it's hit the masses.
We are moving from an industrial age into an information age, and information is becoming much more valuable.
The new commodity that everyone wants to exploit includes history, art, culture. In short, the sum of all human knowledge. While people disagree over who has the right to exploit human knowledge, the big companies that control information are pricing the goods unfairly high. This leaves ordinary people unable to have access to information and even software. Unless you copy it illegally, of course.
Often developing countries require more information or require use of information more often than they actually produce the information. So the argument there is that copyright is unfairly restricting the development of third world countries.
With the opportunities it gives us to share information, the internet is a means by which previously disadvantaged economies can leapfrog the information gap and become producers and not just consumers of knowledge.
There are three things that are very important to South African society right now to bring us into this new millennium, and that is water, electricity, and broadband.
Access to broadband internet actually holds the key for pulling a lot of people out of poverty, and it holds the key, I think, for Africa to really step out.
So you want to be more creative in art, in business, in whatever. If you've ever felt raw to do something creative, but just haven't been able to pull it together, you will adore this movie.
This film explores the various global initiatives that view access to knowledge not just as a basic human right, but as key to bridging the economic divide between rich and poor nations.
When we first heard about the internet, we thought, wow, this is really a fantastic tool, and it can promote global understanding, and people from many cultures can come together and share their knowledge. But then we went through the whole .com era, when the internet seemed like it might be just about pop-up ads and spam and selling dog food and things like this. And Wikipedia really brings us back to that original idea and says, okay, look, we have this global tool for sharing knowledge, so okay, let's share knowledge.
You don't just have to read Wikipedia, you can actually change Wikipedia. You can actually develop Wikipedia in your own language. And I think this is the missing link. It's not just about access to this technology. It's about accessing the potential, the empowering or the empowerment potential of new technology.
The core definition of what Wikipedia is a freely licensed encyclopedia written by thousands of volunteers in many languages. It's really as simple as coming to the website and clicking on the edit button and adding some information. It's a way to get a lot of people involved quickly.
For us in Southern Africa, for example, to be building our own encyclopedias rather than having encyclopedias that traditionally and almost always are written by Americans or written by the West, having our own encyclopedias is a very empowering tool. It's a Wikipedia that you own. It's not translated. You don't translate an article from English to Swahili. You actually write it. You write it from scratch.
In Africa, several organisations have been developed specifically to ensure that African women are brought up to speed with new developments in digital technology. A Across the continent, the network of technology-savvy women is growing.
When we started as Women's Net, very few women's organisations had their own websites, which is also where the idea of this one-stop shop for information emerged from, so that other people can connect to it, to a website and access the information they needed. It's also about breaking down existing phobias around technology, around computers.
The initiative to make software more accessible to people on the ground is giving Africa the chance to join the global village by developing local solutions to local challenges.
My name is Soyabi Mumba. I'm a software developer for Baobab Health. Baobab Health is a non-profit that specializes in providing technology to health centers in Malawi. Technology that is specifically designed to solve the challenges that are made in developing countries.
Baobab mainly does computerizing the process of capturing patients' data in clinics and health centers here in Malawi.
We also realized that there's a shortage of doctors in Malawi, and hence we try to develop systems that have got some aids in treating patients.
The challenge, and indeed the opportunity in this specific case, is to be able to use ICTs to address these problems and not hope that you can address these problems and then when everything is okay, then go to ICTs. They're just supposed to be a tool.
If information technology is to work for us, it has to be affordable.
I wanted to buy Microsoft Office and it costs 6,000 Rand on the website. That's completely out of the reach of most people in this world. So if we really are going to enable people, the vast majority of people, to have access to this empowering technology, software really should be free.
But some say it's not just about cost. People who use the software should have a say in its content. This is where the free and open source software movement comes into play.
The open source software movement is a community of individuals who believe that the source code, the recipe behind the software, should be free for everyone to copy and share and to actually build new software on top of it.
It opens up the code to allow people the freedom to edit and reuse and repurpose and repurpose and reuse and distribute.
There are 4 essential freedoms that make the definition of free software. Freedom 0, the freedom to run the program however you wish. Freedom 1, the freedom to study the source code and change it to do what you wish. Freedom 2, the freedom to copy the program and distribute the copies to others when you wish. And freedom 3 is the freedom to publish or distribute a modified version when you wish. People who cook enjoy the same 4 freedoms in using recipes.
The military's best chefs battled it out in Salt Lake City, Utah this weekend during the first ever Freedom Chef Challenge Cook-Off. You can catch more of the culinary competition on an upcoming special episode of The Grill Sergeants, the Pentagon Channel's own cooking show.
We're not looking at it as free and open source software versus Microsoft. We're basically saying there is an alternative. And I think what we want to say to people, there's another show in town. So they're welcome to go and attend whichever show they want to. We want to develop communities of learning and communities of practice. The communities of learning will be those people who have attended courses. So they plug into that community. So if they have problems, they can send it to the mailing list and others can pick it up and then help them. And in so doing, they can enhance their own understanding of the programs. In this room is our technical room. This is where we teach students how to refurbish computers, because we think it's important that we extend the lives of computers. In so doing, we can then introduce free and open source software so we can get more out of the computer than what we thought we could have. It's one thing giving them a CD that's going to lie around there. It's another thing training them, exposing them to the software.
Seconds into the flight, already traveling at 711 miles per hour.
When you deploy free software in a school, you give those few children in the school who are passionate about technology everything they need to become sophisticated practitioners, to become leaders, and ultimately to stand on the shoulders of the giants who have already created a platform to start stimulating innovation in your country or in your business.
It's our mission and mandate to drive social innovation through education and technology. Everything we do is open. We believe in an open philosophy. The reason why this is hugely beneficial in, for example, an African context, is it allows contextualization. It allows people to genuinely use and reuse those tools for their purpose.
The Shuttleworth Foundation have set up freedom toasters in several South African cities. One touch of the screen and you get all the free software you can lay your hands on. All you need is a blank CD.
The principles of the Freedom Toaster are quite dear to our heart. It's what we strive for, it's what we believe in. I choose the type of content I want to burn. In this case, I'll like to burn a Linux distribution, and Ubuntu is everyone's favorite.
Ubuntu is the world's largest distribution of open source software on the desktop. It can be redistributed, and people hand out CDs to their friends. They can pass it on, download it, use it anywhere.
You can just simply say add to selection. It tells me that it'll start burning in a couple of minutes. I can see what's waiting to burn, if it's a DVD or a CD, and you push the toast button. And everything happens for you. It just starts burning. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to use it.
In the old days when we were young, a traveler through a country would stop at a village and he didn't have to ask for food or for water. Once he stops, the people give him food, entertain him. That is one aspect of Ubuntu, but it will have various aspects.
In many countries, India and Brazil and also China and also actually surprisingly the United States, governments have discovered that it's actually much cheaper to use open source software than to use the rival software produced by companies like Microsoft or Oracle.
Now that the government announced that they were prepared to migrate to an open source platform, it's encouraged a lot of people to start now looking at open source. A lot of companies who initially turned their backs on open source realize that they have to get their act together and start supporting open source. It's a very positive step.
The Maraka Open Source Centre promotes the use of free and open source software in government, the private sector and education. Their recently opened branch in Soweto is setting up a free wireless mesh that covers the whole of the township.
One thing you have to realize is that poor people are not stupid. We might come from a poor neighborhood, but that does not mean this neighborhood cannot produce brilliant people. Some cutting-edge technology can come out of these places.
Creativity always builds on
People taking back control of their lives, of sharing information and culture, of wresting intellectual property out of the hands of big companies that operate within the closed world of patent and copyright laws. The Creative Commons is a non-profit organisation that has developed a set of user-friendly copyright licenses that enables creators to choose the conditions under which they make their film, book, music or copyrightable material available.
I think it's been really good for new and emerging artists, people that aren't signed on big labels, to get their music out there and to be heard, and in some cases to achieve a certain measure of commercial success.
So we're trying to build a private movement where authors and creators signal that they don't need the full range of protection that copyright law automatically gives them. Just take as much as you need, not more than you need. Leave the rest of it into the commons so that other people can build upon it.
Every year, the iSummit brings people from across the world together to discuss innovative ways to give anyone, anywhere, access to knowledge.
Before the world was small because Earth was big. Today, the world is too big because Earth is small, of the size of a parabolic camera antenna. Turn of the world camera, world turns camera.
The best way to describe, I think, the conference is a generosity of spirit. There's a real essence of wanting to share.
Creative Commons is a nonprofit that gives artists and creators free tools to enable them to mark their creativity with the freedoms they want it to carry. So if I'm a musician and I want to invite people to remix my work, I can mark my creative work with a license that signals clearly you're free to remix this however you want. And the objective here is to make it easy for artists and authors to build a platform of freedom for other artists and authors to build upon and to make their work more accessible to people around the world.
CC allows then people to comply with Copyright Act because it is a type of copyright. It's a copyleft where you copy and can give to others. So it allows you to comply with that law while at the same time being able to share the information.
Recently, a group of South Africans set up a national chapter of Creative Commons, joining over 40 other countries who make up the Creative Commons movement.
I think Creative Commons definitely has a huge role to play in South Africa. I think most of our traditional knowledge and our cultural expressions will eventually be licensed under the Creative Commons license.
I think just like we have the internet protocol, just like we had the web, to me Creative Commons is a whole other layer of allowing cultural and content communication that will open up a completely new business, which we call the sharing economy.
What I'm in favor of is a serious assessment of recognizing that there are competing interests here, that there's a free speech interest in being able to take prior work and modify and adapt it.
What does it mean to take George W. Bush and twist his words in such a way that they're just pointed right back at him?
From NBC News, the State of the Union Address.
The enemies of freedom, danger, tyranny, September the 11th.
Satirists have been playing with that for years, and it's nice that there's an encouragement to have a more nuanced playfulness to art.
I hope you'll join me in expressing fear and selfishness. We will embrace tyranny and death as a cause and a creed.
For some reason, people think professional is better. But amateur, like the original Latin or French word of doing it for passion or doing it because you love it or as a hobby, I mean, that's almost more pure to me than a professional. I mean, at least in sex, you realize that professional sex isn't as sincere as amateur sex. professional sex isn't as sincere as amateur sex. And I think what Creative Commons is really not only, but in many ways celebrating the amateur. Right now in the United States, you can't sample anything. So a lot of musicians were supportive of the idea of creating a license that allowed sampling.
Some artists would say it's not really art unless it can reach an audience. And you know, that creating art and creating music is a relationship between someone who hears it and someone who creates it.
I do put some music out with the Creative Commons license. Generally, I use the attribution license, which says you can use this work for commercial purposes, for anything you want, really, as long as you attribute, the source.
So you can use the powers of the net to find works free to share and build upon, and to invite other people to transform or trade yours so that you can get creative, not only with what you make, but how you make it available. So you can collaborate across space and time. So you can be a co-author with someone you've never met. So you can stand on the shoulders of your peers, all without asking permission, because permission has already been granted.
When you share your creativity, you're enabling people anywhere to use it, learn from it, and be inspired by it.
In cultures like the United States, which have been enamored of this extremism in intellectual property, which believes that if you're not paying every time you use culture, you're a, quote, pirate.
The advancing technology makes it ever cheaper and quicker and easier to create unauthorized or pirated copies of music or movies, whatever the case may be. The big companies who own the copyright definitely would argue that this is detrimental because they have spent a lot of money creating the movie or the song and want to recoup some of that. If they don't make money on the song or on the movie, then there's no incentive for them to produce that next movie.
Look, super mega rock and roll gods and superstars are just regular dudes like you guys. We punch the clock, we put on the pants, and then we blow people's minds. That's how we make a living. And then these pirates come and they steal all our internets. I don't know how they do it, but these pirates can bust into our entertainers' homes, make us walk the plank, steal our rockin' tunes, and leave us broke. Is that what you want, Mr. Long John Silver? I don't think so. Don't be a douche. Stop piracy.
What is interesting about the internet is it has allowed a community of people who believe that those tools should not be owned in the same way that a car is owned or a bus is owned, but should be available in the same way that a dictionary is available to anybody or the language that we use is available to anybody. In the same way, software tools that allow us to interact over the internet should be commonly owned.
Pirate Bay is a Swedish internet site where just about any published media is available for downloading, regardless of copyright. This has seen an active response from the corporate world.
A good approximation is about 1 to 2 million unique visitors per day.
On the 31st of May 2006, Swedish police raided Pirate Bay server rooms.
All servers from all our server rooms were taken. In total, somewhere around 250-300 servers, where the Pirate Bay is about 20 of those servers.
Mäktiga filmintressena i Hollywood har skickat sin intresseorganisation MPAA till Vita huset i Washington. Amerikanska utrikesdepartementet har sedan tagit kontakt med UD i Sverige och krävt att problemet med Pirate Bay måste lösas.
They think that the US jurisdiction stretches around the world. That it's illegal according to US law, but it's not illegal according to Swedish law. And the users really appreciated that we talk back to them, tell them that you don't decide over the internet, we, the users, do.
The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? I was. Look again. Freeze it. If you are not one of us, you are one of them.
There was mentioned a threat of WTO sanctions against Sweden. And in the first hand, maybe about US putting Sweden on this thing called the priority watch list.
Vi diskuterade ingående organisationen Pirate Bay, verksam i Sverige. Som ni säkert vet har den amerikanska ambassaden enträget bett Sveriges regering att agera mot Pirate Bay. Jag vill återigen uppmana er att utöva ett inflytande för att få de rättsvårdande myndigheterna i Sverige.
Directly after the raid, the MPAA sent out a press release saying basically mission succeeded. And that also shows very clear, I think, that the mission was not convicting people, it was sabotaging.
We will never stop piracy, never. We just have to try to make it as difficult and as tedious as possible, and we have to let people know there are consequences if they're caught.
The obvious goal of the police was to get the Pirate Bay offline, but they failed miserably. After 3 days, the servers were back up and most of the backups restored. So the site worked perfectly.
Spectacular success for us.
I heard someone from South Africa recently speaking at a conference. One of his opinions was that people who pirated DVDs needed to get the death sentence. And he also told a story about a guy who had been selling DVDs on the street. The cops had found him with one DVD and he'd got 2 years in prison.
There is a fantastic quote by Mark Getty, who is the owner of Getty Images, and he's one of the largest intellectual proprietors in the world. He once said, intellectual property is the oil of the 21st century. He declared war with that, saying, we will fight for these completely hallucinatory rights to images, ideas, texts, thoughts, inventions, just as we're fighting now for access to natural resources.
It's not a question of right or wrong anymore. What's the line about behind every great fortune lies a great crime? So the guys who started this business all cheated somebody to get there, and so now they're being cheated, perhaps.
What's really at stake for the movie industry with all this piracy?
Well, I think, ultimately our absolute future.
Peter Chernin runs 20th Century Fox, one of the biggest studios in Hollywood.
Somebody can put a perfect digital copy up on the internet, perfect digital copy, right? And with the click of a mouse, send out 1 million copies all over the world in an instant.
Although it's difficult to believe it now, we can do without the entertainment industries. We'll find new ways to get the stuff we want made. We want the world in which we can share, work together, and find new ways to support each other while we're doing it. This is the world we're trying to bring into being.
What happens when a copying mechanism is invented? And you can take the printing press or you can take BitTorrent. It shapes people's habits. It gives people completely new ideas how they could work together, how they could share, what they could relate to, what their lives could be.
Because communicating, so fundamental to what we do in the world, is itself an act of copying.
Before, nobody owned melodies. People performed. They got paid for their performance. You'd sing for literally sing for your supper. You go to a tavern like this, a pub. You stand up there, you put a few tunes up. People would flush you with money if you were good. If you were lousy, you wouldn't eat much. And you survived, you know, and other people would hear your melodies, they'd hear the melodies, they'd go to another pub, they'd perform the things, and music spread in that way. It was organic, it wasn't owned by anybody.
Our trademark department does go on many raids. They've confiscated hundreds, thousands perhaps of pirated DVDs. They aim not so much at the man on the street, because you can catch him and maybe confiscate 10 or 20 DVDs, but they're aiming their efforts at the importers. You know, if you can stop them at the ports, Durban Harbour, or whatever the case may be, and collect a whole consignment of pirated DVDs, counterfeit goods, you know, then you can really put a dent in the counterfeit market.
It's something that won't stop now. It's something that's going to keep on being here unless people are actually serious about stopping it. If pirated CDs would be like raided like drugs, yeah, then basically maybe it might stop.
We've actually reached the stage where the privatization of knowledge has reached such a state where the commons, knowledge that's freely available for people to share, has become so small and so diminished that it's actually having a negative effect on the sharing of culture, on the development of local cultures and local languages, for example.
Certainly when we see that schools in Africa are using textbooks that are many years out of date because they can't afford the contemporary textbooks, which are priced very high due to copyright, this can't be a good thing.
At postgrad level, the amount of references that you actually need are extensive, and you need like masses and masses of references. There's no way possible that you can go out and buy all those books. A lot of them are published by specific academic presses, and you just cannot afford them, like 600, 700 rand a book. So we just photocopy chapters here and there.
The Copyright Act does make provision for fair use, which may be a small portion of a textbook, you know, perhaps a chapter out of the whole textbook, which you may be allowed to use without infringing a copyright. Some people who photocopied entire textbooks have been taken to court, and I think they've been prosecuted successfully.
Copyright is going to devolve back to the creators, the original writers of novels, to the original scorers and lyricists and writers and filmmakers who actually create the content. And the middle men, the publishing companies, the owners, the distribution companies, are going to become specialists in what they do best. And that is distributing content, not owning content.
I spent 6 years of my life creating something that I don't own. More than that, actually. User, 3 seasons. And 6 years down the line, I don't own shit, you know? I thought, fuck, you know, let me just go out and do my own stuff that I own. And recently I've kind of been basically living in the internet world and just kind of checking out a whole lot of sites and realizing like there's so many, you know, communities of people out there where, you know, people are making like stuff on like small cameras and posting it on the net, and then you have like immediate responses through like bloggers, you know, they're blocking and then respond immediately about your film. Suddenly I'm not just an African filmmaker. Yes, I'm a filmmaker doing stuff in Africa, but I belong to this community that's global, and I love that.
In the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen about 30 South African films being produced. 1 or 2 of the films have done extremely well at film festivals. What we didn't have is any of the films making any money locally, and only 1 or 2 films making money internationally. As the internet evolves, as it surely will, and as mobile technology is and will evolve, the ability to reach an audience will be possible. YouTube and MySpace are free platforms to market one's own content to a huge audience that we never had access to before. In the same way, you're going to have filmmakers who are born on MySpace and YouTube, migrating towards the making of professional content.
So we decided, let's do this little video. We had been working on a piece and we thought it would work perfect about
an African boy adopted by an Iranian family. Basically, it's a film about realizing we're all the flowers of one garden. We put this thing up, sent out that 50 emails, and we saw the niche nature of the video start to work.
Joseph مثلا من اسمم عارفه و 8 سالمه من از آفریقا میام.
It was one of the biggest eye-opening experiences I've ever had, because not only did we get bombarded with emails, but we just saw the numbers of people viewing this obscure website, obscure page on a website, over and over and over. Within the first 4 days, there was 25,000 viewings of this thing.
The world has never been better for filmmakers, for program makers.
Intellectual property, when it's justified in political terms, is always justified on the basis that we need to reward the individual creator. Most intellectual property is actually owned by large corporations who did not innovate, but rather bought those ideas from the people who did innovate.
In the European Union, every year, over 60,000 million euros are wasted on research and development of products and technologies that are already protected by patent law. The combined yearly revenues of Microsoft and Apple are the equivalent of 50 large high-tech hospitals. 4 million patents are in force worldwide. 800,000 inventions are registered every year. In Europe, there were 178,000 patent applications in 2002. Some even say there is a war going on, the IP war.
This is my latest computer program. It not only runs Windows, it washes them too.
Microsoft is a known, convicted offender in terms of anti-competitive practices. Why are we allowing Microsoft patents? We need to address these important questions right away.
Does Microsoft intend to continue to break the law in South Africa by filing patents which are specifically excluded by our patent legislation? Does Microsoft intend in South Africa to continue ignoring the law?
The future without patents is unsustainable. You cannot be part of a global community that wants to innovate, that wants to compete, and choose that you are going to have no form of patent legislation or software patents respect at all. We believe that we invest a phenomenal amount of money during the R&D phase, which is where the real innovation takes place.
What I don't understand is what Microsoft itself seeks to get out of having software patents in South Africa. Do you have a large development office here? Are you doing a lot of development work in South Africa that would need to have local innovation protected from?
Not really. Not of the level of.
Could you possibly name a few countries that recognize software patents besides Australia and the States? Places like Japan, China, the European Union, the rest of Africa, numbers alone, they dwarf those two countries. Why should we follow their laws? If we need to have it harmonized, why don't they change their laws to our laws?
It's not two unimportant countries. It's fairly big players in the global economy. South Africa cannot afford a posturing that excludes it from the global imperatives of competing in
In South Africa, we have a current legal system. And if you want to come here and if you want to participate and if you want to sell software to the end users in South Africa, then you will have to comply with the laws that exist in South Africa. And if you think at this point that we don't have the might to actually defend our laws, then just watch the space.
We are go. Ignition sequence 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All engines running. Launch commit. Liftoff. We have liftoff at 9:34 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
The issue of patents extends beyond information technology, beyond culture.
In Southern Africa, the high cost of drugs patented by pharmaceutical companies has threatened the right to life itself.
Now this one called AIDS, and this disease can't be cured. You hear that? When you catch AIDS, when you catch AIDS, when you catch AIDS, you will shorten your days. When you catch AIDS, when you catch AIDS, when you catch AIDS, you will shorten your days. No exchange, no refund. When you meet a girl, use a condom, because this disease is going around, and this disease is putting us down. When you catch AIDS, when you catch AIDS, when you catch AIDS, you will shorten your days. When you catch AIDS, when you catch AIDS. Down with African potato, down! Down with African potato, down! Forward with ARVs, forward!
In the knowledge age, the World Trade Organization and the World Intellectual Property Organization attempt to set the rules for all global knowledge. Many activists argue that their agendas are set by corporate interests based in developed countries.
Some people refer to the digital divide in the South African context as digital apartheid, and I'm using that deliberately because if you take apartheid, it was not popular with a big number of people, but it certainly benefited some.
The average African has to work nearly 5 years to buy a copy of Microsoft XP, while the average American has to work 3 days.
Rural areas, for example, which just don't have access to roofs and water, let alone information communication technologies.
Given the fact that there are 500 million children of school-going age in Africa, is the fact that these children are being educated by people that have not yet been given, one, an opportunity to use ICTs in their training of children, and are often disenfranchised and therefore unwilling, disinterested in using computers.
But there's actually another problem, and that's that when teaching ICTs in schools, educators are not really teaching how technology can be empowering, how it can enable self-learning.
And I think the government was sold a dream that people were going to use these technologies, but instead no one did a good job in educating the teachers.
We have a unique opportunity in that for the first time ever, an African country will be hosting the World Cup football in 2010. And as important as it is to build the stadia, to build the roads and to provide tourist opportunities, is the ability to create a digital superhighway out of Africa to the rest of the world.
So the challenge for Africa is quality public infrastructure. Free software means nothing when Africa's telephone, internet and broadband services continue to be the highest priced in the world.
It's a horrible situation where the cost of broadband is probably 5 or 6 times what it is in North America, in Europe. I mean, you want to have a movie, it's 300 megabytes minimum. That means you can do like 4 or 5 before your internet gets cut off, and you're paying close to 600, more rand a month, which is close to $100 a month. I was just in China. There's over 150 million broadband users. They pay less than 100 rand a month for unlimited access, and at 10 times the speed of what the cheap offering is.
Governments are going to have to, as a right, allow access to the internet, a basic inalienable human right, as it is to water and to housing. There's going to be access to information. And those societies that do not provide access to information are ones that are going to lag behind in the world. And we see it in South Africa now.
I don't think it's a lack of political will on the part of the South African government, but I would say that it is perhaps our slow processes.
So if we allow that countries only have a certain amount of money to spend on development, then obviously if we reduce the cost of those intellectual tools like software that help certain forms of development, we allow more money to be spent on other also very important elements of development like clean water, health and various other aspects that are important to the population at large.
The doors of learning and culture can only be opened if we are willing to stand up to the might of the multinationals whose only interest is profit. While free and open source software is exploding in India and Brazil, many African countries continue to lag behind their counterparts in the fight for access to information.
Now they're making music in school with a laptop.
Unlike people who are in the extreme free software world who think everything should be free versus people in Hollywood who think that everything should be commercial, we're saying that everyone should have a choice.
If we accept the connection between poverty and ignorance, then surely the priority for development is to address the digital divide.
The 20th century is this bizarre century of what I call read-only culture, where, especially in the developed world, culture's professional and produced, and people are supposed to sit there and consume it, like the couch potato culture. Digital technologies is giving us a chance to revive a much more important tradition of culture, which is about people creating and sharing culture.
If you have to, give one to your friend. If you have three, give one to your friend and me.
So I'm just positing that instead of wasting energy with lawyers and fighting this and documents and all of that nightmare stuff which makes life so incredibly boring for filmmakers, I just moved away from it. I said, no, I'm not going to bother with that. And I've made 112 short films since I did that. Some of them are very good, some of them are terrible.
It's always more fun to share with everyone. It's always more fun to share with everyone.
Everybody I know is so hampered by the system, which is what they want. They want you to be crushed and feeling, you know, powerless.
If you have one, here is something you can learn. You can still share just by taking turns.
Day in, day out, the sun is giving itself away for free. That is the model for Sample at Will. There is no copyright. Sample the sun.
Imagine a world in which everyone has access to the sum of all human knowledge.
I may not be all the things you want me to be. I may not be all the things you want me to be. I may not be all the things you want me to be. I may not be all the things you want me to be. I may not be all the things you want me to be. I may not be all the things you want me to be. I may not be all the things you want me to be. I may not be all the things you want me to be. 仔细听你的心，有温柔的声音，它要唱个不停，我要真的高兴，一颗心。
I'm going to go into YouTube as soon as I leave you. I'm going to put this on. People all around the world will be following this extraordinary debate on their computers, copyright free. By the time you get your documentary out, they'll be saying, that's the guy we watched 2 years ago on the internet.
仔细听你的心，有温柔的声音， 他要唱个不停，他要唱个不停，我要真的高兴，我要一颗心。
Hi, thank you for watching. If you like this documentary and are interested in content just like this, please don't forget to click the like button and subscribe button just below the video. Thank you.